Well, continuing with our next delivery of the study that we have proposed ourselves, take heed that no one deceives you. We have arrived to our first plateau, to our first point of equilibrium. From here we can start visualizing a series of places, circumstances, and facts that are controversial. With what we have already learned, with what we already know, with what we have in our hands, we have now the spiritual capacity, the strength, and the truth to begin discovering deceits, deceits that have been perpetuated by the ignorance in which we have been subdued by these religious Babylonian groups, be it pagan Catholics or pagan evangelicals. And we already have more clarity. And why? Because we have to depart from being obtuse, from being lazy, from being deceived, that they lie to us, and begin digging in the scriptures the truth. And there it is. Nobody can change that. Said in other way, we have arrived to the point, to the first fundament, or to one of the fundaments that structurate a series of themes. That is also revealing. I remember that many years ago I read this famous book, the Book of Cachemira, Jesus in Cachemira. Those who have not read it, if you want to read it, read it. Those that have already read it know much or less what it is about. There has been from the part of the pagans of the mystery of iniquity, of deceit, of lie, of falsehood, a propaganda very well mounted, a mediatic propaganda taken to the greater extremes to try to deceive the biggest possible number of people. For those of us that are studying the scriptures and want to know the truth and fulfill the precept of behold that no one deceives you, today we can say with clarity the following. First, that our lies, the declarations that Jesus had a family, had descendants. You will remember that false movies, for example, the Da Vinci Code, that tries to take the supposed or the good news, in there they call it the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, in which it is tried to say that Jesus got married with her, or coupled with her, or was with her, and from that a bloodline came out. But because our reference cannot be mules, donkeys, cows, but it has to be the Word of God, not ignorance, not individuals that search to enrich themselves at the expense of the ignorance of people. That is why we are not going to give them any value. We are not interested. We won't deal with donkeys, nor mules, nor bulls, nothing. In other words, irrationals, we are not interested. Scammers, we are not interested. Thieves, we are not interested. That want to take from the history what doesn't exist. Why? Because we know clearly that when God defined man before the fall, always insisting before the fall, did not made him with gender, but only made him what he was, an individual that only had to worry about following the instructions that God had gave him. Didn't happen as it happened with the plants and animals. Reproduction was not made to reproduce. Even though there will be contradictory passages in a struggle that there exists in the Book of Chaos, trying to put into us that yes, God had destined him for reproduction, but we know that that is not true. And why is it not true? Because the same chapter 1 verse 26 and part of the verse 27 clearly express that God made him in his image and his likeness. Today we're taking from that great plurivalue knowledge that that declaration has, just a part, just an extreme, just a grain of sand, and is that in order to be in the likeness of God, had to behave also as God was. That doesn't have gender. We are talking before the fall. Please do not say that there are passages in Matthew, Mark, in the Old Covenant after this, because then the discussion is not that. We are talking before the fall. That is why when the Messiah is born with that same value that Adam had before the fall. And that is why he didn't have that problem of sex. That is why when Satan tempted him, within the temptations there was no woman, because he knew that that was a waste of time. But all this we have to analyze it. We are only giving a sketch of what we are pretending to finish discovering. That is why it is important for us to no longer believe, no longer watch, no longer follow deceptions such as the Da Vinci Code, as well as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, such as the line of Jesus, that as if he went to Cachemira, like as he had a descendants, because all that is a lie, and that I don't need to ask him because it is in the text. We'll prefer to ask him a number of things because anything but this. Because he who doesn't know God cannot talk about him, and it is supposed that we have the obligation to know him, to understand him within the scope of our capacities. So as said before, we have arrived to the plateau where we can look with clarity to the profound of the horizon and begin to distinguish a series of additional topics that obviously, because of the definition of the study, we are not going to be able to analyze them. We will have light to get into a strong debate about the book of Genesis, because there are many things to say, but regretfully we are circumscribed to the theme in particular. And we must clarify that when God created Adam, the man, we do not have to use the term man after the fall, but before the fall. Created Adam to the image and likeness of God. But regretfully, in the verse 27, Moses added something particular that belongs to him after the fall, with a previous knowledge, and puts that he created male and female, thing that is not true, and that is not said by me. He tells it himself in chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, and there is where the famous contradictions begin, contradictions that will continue throughout the time because regretfully things are being told and personal interests of each one are introduced. Moses should not have wrote that, should have been only plain and simply a writer of history, just as it was, and remain in that verse 27. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him. Period. Until there. That other addition that follows, that is not true. Why? Because when God created Eve, or made, Eve, he made her with other purpose, not with the carnal purpose that they put later. That is why it is important to study the scriptures, but study them, not read them, study them, so that there is revelation of God, and that revelation demonstrates where is the problem. Well, we are finding one of a countless of problems. So we want to leave proven that it is not true that Jesus the Messiah had a descendants, because it is not true, because he had no gender, was born with that privilege of not having those type of needs. That is why he dedicated himself to comply the divine mandate, the mandate of God. He said, I came here for your message and come to deliver this message. And that was it, nothing more. So we invite you to write us to our email, thelastchurch7 in number, okay, gmail.com. You can visit our webpage, churchofgod.tk. You can visit us in Facebook, in Instagram, in Twitter. You can send your questions, your concerns, your doubts, and we will gladly try to answer them. Beforehand, thank you very much.